You might think that I made a mistake in the title, but no, it was on purpose, and the reason is woman grandmaster Dina Belenkaya has recently published some material introducing herself as a grandmaster. Well, she's a woman grandmaster, and there is a gap between what we understand as a grandmaster and a woman grandmaster. Actually, the requirements are very different, and the international master is more difficult to achieve than the women grandmaster. And in this game that we are going to take a look at, women grandmaster Dina Belenkaya faces international master IM Arabidze from Georgia, a very strong player. This being said, now let's just analyze the game. Woman grandmaster Dina Belenkaya plays first e4 and international master Arabidze responds with c5, knight f3, e6, an invitation to go into an open Sicilian with d4, c takes d4, and then either a Paulsen, a Taimanov, or something similar. However, white decides to play something different, and the move Belenkaya played was c3, so it's some sort of delayed Alapin where white plays a late c3. So black responds with knight f6 and transposes to the main line, e5, knight d5, and now d4, c takes d4, all very common, all moves very common, c takes d4, and now b6. And this is a very trendy and also tricky sideline. The idea of black in some lines is to play bishop to a6 and exchange this bishop here as soon as it developed. So a good move here would be something like knight to c3. Then black should take on c3 or defend the knight on d5. However, this position comes up very often. And then bishop to b7, bishop d3, and black should pay attention to what he is doing, because if he or she plays without looking at her opponent's moves, then already these sort of things might happen, and white is already much better here. Instead, a move like d6 would save the day for black, and this position is around equal. Let's go back. So bishop to d3 played, and why is this not a very main line? Well, let's see. Bishop to e7 played by black, white castles, and now bishop to a6. And now we see, okay, the bishops are going to be exchanged, and usually the white squared bishop is the bishop white wants to keep. And here still moves like knight to c3 are very common. Knight takes c3, b takes c3, and this position wouldn't be that good for black because the queen is already very centralized, and after castling moves like h4 are possible because bishop takes h4 fails due to queen to e4 being a double attack on bishop and rook, not very pleasant. Let's go back. So instead, bishop takes a6 was played, then followed knight takes a6, knight b to d2, black castles, knight to e4, knight a c7, and this position is around equal. Bishop g5, white wants to exchange the black squared bishops and then play against h7. However, this isn't working out that great here because black can play a move like f6, and f6 is very ambitious. And now white could have gone for a line like e takes f6, but then you end up with this isolated pawn, and this is probably something the white player disliked. So bishop to d2 played, now f5, a very strong move, knight to c3, and now b5, and as you can see, black is just taking over the command here. Black is dictating the game. Queen to e2, attacking this pawn a second time, and black defends it with queen to b8, a very reasonable move. Rook fc1, queen b7, making space for the rooks to come and also connecting the rooks. So essentially it's finishing the development. Knight to e1, queen to b6, attacking the d4 pawn. Now it needs to be defended. Knight to c2, a6, a prophylactic move, a4, and now b4 was played. After a5, queen to a7. Now, after knight a4, black could have gone for a move like knight to b5 and attack this pawn another time, an additional time, but she decided to first play b3, which is also fine. Maybe a little bit worse, because here black might only get an equal game after knight to e3. But in the game, knight to a3 happened, and this invites black to win some material, because after bishop takes a3, there's rook takes a3, and now knight b5, double attack against the rook and against this pawn. Not very pleasant. Rook a1, now knight takes d4. The queen has to move, queen to d3, and this position is very ugly for white. Knight to c2, rook a b1 forced, rook a b8, defending the b3 pawn, rook d1, rook f c8, improving the pieces. And now h4 was played, queen to d4, and exchanging the queens is really what black wants to achieve, because also this pawn might be weak at some point and black is already up a pawn. So exchanging material is in the interest of black. Queen takes d4, pretty forced. Knight takes d4, bishop e3, and now knight to c2 was played. However, knight to e2 check had probably won immediately, because after king f1 there's knight g3 check, and taking here isn't really possible due to this check, and black gains further material, so not very good. But king e1, then knight takes e3, f takes e3, and rook c2, very unpleasant. This pawn is weak, these pawns are all bad. In the game, knight to c2 was played as mentioned, then bishop to b6, rook c4, attacking the defender, knight to c3, and now black finally picks up the second pawn. So first knight d4 played, rook d3, and now rook takes b6, and white didn't have a chance to protect this pawn, so it was going to be lost anyway. Knight to d1, and now d5, e takes d5, rook takes d5. Now black has also some pawns which can move. This pawn can move and this pawn can move. Very unpleasant. King f1, but pay attention what Dina Belenkaya is going to achieve. e5, knight e3, looks threatening, but actually everything is defended and the rook just needs to move. Rook c6, rook b to d1, and now g6. Black doesn't really have weaknesses here. g3, king f7, f4. E takes f4 and g takes f4. And this position doesn't look very good for white, excuse me. But white will find a way to come back into the game, or at least force white to some mistakes. Black to some mistakes, sorry. White will come back in the game, not black. Rook takes b3. Now white has gained a pawn, so only down one pawn, but still the position isn't that good. Rook takes d1, knight takes d1, and now rook to c4. And this is the reason why actually black allowed white to grab the pawn, because these pawns are just a nightmare. So rook f3, now h5 played, king to g2, and now black could have gone for a move like knight d4, and rook a3 maybe, and knight to e6, and the pawns are going to fall. However, in the game, a5 was played, and this is giving Dina Belenkaya the chance to come back, and she does with rook to b3. Now the position is still worse, but after rook to b4, the position is completely equal, because this position, believe it or not, is draw, if it is played in a good way. And Dina Belenkaya for a long time manages to hold this position. Knight f2, knight d4, knight d3, and it's not obvious how black wants to make progress here. b3, a very good move. King d6, king e3, centralizing the kings, and now knight b2, and still there is no way Dina Belenkaya is allowing black to utilize this extra pawn. So knight d3, check back, king d5, knight b2, knight b8. Black tries some other moves, knight a6, knight e1, king c5, knight d3 check, king d5, knight e5, and now let's go to a crucial moment, because here, after knight e5, this pawn is attacked, but also this pawn. So white takes the g6 because this pawn could not be defended anymore. Knight takes b3, and now knight e7 check. The position is completely equal. King to c5, knight takes f5, and now actually the pawns, or the amount of pawns is equal. So 2 pawns against 2 pawns, each side has a knight. Knight a5, king to d3, still a good move. Knight to c4, knight g7, well played, b3. And now is a very important moment. Now it's very important to take the h5 pawn. After king b4, there's knight g3, b2, pushing the pawn, king c2, king a3, and now, very important, knight e2, king a2, and the knight is going to defend against this passed pawn. However, in the game, white decided to play f5, and this is losing because now king b4 immediately is defending the pawn. Knight e4, trying to bring back the knight. b2, king c2, and now the point, king to a3, and now f6 was played because this move doesn't make much sense. This runs into this, and then king a2, and black will promote. So f6 played, but after f6 there's king a2, and unfortunately for white, black is promoting with check. And this is where Dina Belenkaya decided to resign. A very interesting game with mutual mistakes. So not a perfect game, but both players showed, for example, Arabidze showed that she outplayed white right from the opening. And it looked like white hasn't a chance. But in the end game, the white player managed to come back. And this is a skill which is very important on a higher level, especially on Grandmaster level. It doesn't matter how bad their position is, as long as they have chances, they somehow find ways to make the life or the conversion of the advantage of their opponent very hard. As always, I hope you like this video, and this video about resistance, putting up a resistance, might be very interesting for you. So feel free to watch it. See you.